Hey guys, Gemma from ASD Rocks. I'm gonna try and make this short, although I never actually quite managed to do that. I want to discuss what happens when two parents can't agree on getting a child a diagnosis or even really looked at. So, to keep it really short, one of two or three things is going to happen. Now, when I say one parent, I don't care if it's, the mother, the father, two mothers, two fathers. It doesn't matter. It's about, or a mother and a single mother and the grandparent or whatever it is. This is about people disagreeing about whether to get a diagnosis for the child involved. So, number one, first case scenario, you fight. Oh my God, do you fight? I believe that the last time, a couple of years ago, the statistics, this was a couple of years ago, and keep in mind that the influx of people who are now recognizing traits of autism in their children is just going up and up and up. Like 17 years ago, I was the only person that I or any of my friends knew of that had an autistic kid. So now, honestly, I meet a neurodivergent person every day. Someone that's got a kid that's got either ADHD or ASD or Asperger's or whatever they're calling it. But years ago, it just wasn't as popular as it is now. So you will fight. And a few years ago, the statistic was 83% of marriages / partnerships ended up breaking up. 83% of partnerships with children diagnosed with autism ended up in divorce or breaking up. That is a huge statistic. That's a huge number of them. Now, this isn't breaking up over getting a diagnosis. This is breaking up either A, because it's, kid's so severe, one of them just can't handle it, or it's the trying to get the kid a diagnosis and they're fighting and they disagree, or there are a number of factors that come into it, but throughout the time. But yeah, it's so the first part is the fighting. Now, it can end in breaking up. It can be, it can be such a bone of contention. One parent literally fighting for their child, seeing these problems and these issues, and the other one, when even Richard, who is one of the most absolutely intelligent and rational human beings I have ever met in my life, he was like, no, there's nothing wrong. Like, look, he points, or, and I was kind of doing the same thing. I was sort of like, oh no, there's a bit of eye contact there, and you can sort of deny it for, until you can't deny it anymore. Some people can deny it forever, okay? That's the absolute truth of the matter. Some people can deny it forever, and usually that is when the parent will end up in a breakup situation. So the first thing is that you fight. Now, how long do you fight for? So this is a really interesting thing. You either fight until one comes around, you fight until one gives up, or you fight until you break up. Now, maybe that takes 6 months, maybe that takes a year, maybe it takes longer. My suggestion in regards to any parent that is looking for a diagnosis is get on the phone and make that appointment with a developmental pediatrician. Do not go to your GP for a diagnosis. They are not qualified. Don't jump on the internet. Go and see someone who actually works in the area, specifically in the area. And the reason that I say this is because I've come across so many people who, their kids are displaying some symptoms but not others, and some of those symptoms which within the autistic world would be considered definitely, yes, this on top of this on top of that, GPs will just dismiss. For example, toe walking. Now, yeah, I'm not saying that every kid that toe walks is autistic, but that's why you need to go to a specialist, specifically a developmental pediatrician. Toe walking is really bad for your child, whether they have autism or not. And a lot of GPs will just, say, oh, it's a phase, or don't worry about it, or whatever. As you know, we have been fixing the damage done in the first 2 years of Bo permanently toe walking, because the muscles and the bones, because the bones are so soft and developing at that age, he actually caused such damage from the feet, ankles, knees, hips, that it's taken us until he's 17 and we're still just fixing the damage that was done. So we really want to go and see someone. Yes, you might need to get a referral from your GP to go and see a developmental pediatrician, but it's worth doing. So what I'm getting at is, if you're seeing traits and you're arguing, or you bring it up with your partner and they don't necessarily agree, do you know what? Get that referral anyway. Make that appointment, because these days it's taking 6 to 12 months, usually 12 months at minimum, to get into a proper developmental pediatrician. So you have 6 to 12 months to fight, right? But if you wait that 6 to 12 months and then you break up, and then you finally, or you wait that 6 to 12 months and they come around, you now have another 6 to 12 months to wait, and you have missed out on a year, a good year's worth of earlier intervention. And as we all know, the younger you are diagnosed, the easier it is from a neuroplasticity point of view. The brain at a younger age is much, much more capable of learning and change than the brain is at after the age specifically of, I believe, 10. So now the arguments and the fighting and the denial. So firstly, you're going to start noticing things, or your partner starts noticing things, and that's that point where you start going, oh, is this something I should look at, or isn't it? If you're noticing something or a few things, you can be convinced, and it is also very much part of the grief and that denial process. Oh no, well, he's or she, is as Bo was. He was pointing, he'd see an aeroplane and point. I would say to my friends, you know, he's toe walking, he's got the, you know, and one of my girlfriends would be like, oh my God, my daughter's 12, she's toe walking, she's been toe walking ever since, and she's fine, like she's absolutely 100%. And then I'd say to another friend, you know, he still hasn't said anything, like he's not talking, not a mama, nothing. And they're like, oh, our kid didn't talk till 4, and you know, we can't shut him up. And then I'd say to someone else, you know, doesn't seem to understand the playing, you know, he's not playing with other kids the way they are. They'll take a car, and they'll go vroom, 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 and he sort of just takes them and lines them up. He's not really interested in playing with that person, or he'll pick up the things and he'll go over alone in his room. And they'll be like, yeah, you know, my kid's not really into other kids either, but you know, it's just his nature, and he's absolutely fine. He's, you know, he's now in grade 3, and he's starting to really make friends and blah blah blah. What I didn't realize while I was trying to rationalize these, you know, the OCD, the toe walking, the lack of language, the lack of play, the lack of imaginary, you know, receptive, and all this language, everything, was that I was going to like 5-6 different people, and they were all saying, oh, my kid does that. Their kid was doing one thing, mine was doing all of it. And that's when you have to realize, you know, that, oh, yes, that person is toe walking. Not really, just being a toe walker isn't enough to be, you know, diagnosed with autism. My kid isn't talking. Just not talking isn't enough to be diagnosed with autism. But when your kid's doing all of those things, that's when you need to realize, okay, there's an actual time. And even that takes time for you to get your head around before you make this appointment. So however long it takes you to get your head around it, you've already missed some time. If you are concerned, regardless of whether you are still in that phase of asking questions and saying, I'm not sure, I don't know 100%, you know, and people are saying, you know, and you're even saying potentially to yourself, oh, you know, it could change in the next 6 to 12 months, then you know what? Cancel the appointment, right? Go to the GP, get a referral for a developmental pediatrician, specifically, preferably in the area of autism, but which most developmental pediatricians will be. And if things go fine, if your partner convinces you that, you know what, it's nothing, or they're going to leave and you know, they won't let you, or whatever it happens to be, cancel the appointment. What's the worst? Like, that's no big deal. But you have that appointment in there, because if it does come down to the fact that your partner's not going to come around, or your mother, or your sister, or your whoever it is that, you know, isn't seeing or doesn't want to see, and you've seen it for a while, you've got that, you know, you've got that feeling in you, something just isn't right. I've had so many people write to me saying that they are having diagnoses between 7 and 14, and one key phrase that every single one of these people who have written to me have said the same thing. We always kind of knew. Now, if you always kind of knew, then you really should have gotten onto it earlier. Not for you, but for the kid. Because it is so much easier having all of the access to all of the therapies and all of the little things that you can do that will help that kid. So if something's niggling at you, look, and it may be a completely different situation. My situation was totally different. For us, it was my mother, of all people, who, having said that, my mother diagnosed Richard as well. That was the first time I ever heard the word, well, other than in Rain Man. I'd seen Rain Man because that came out, I think, in must have been the late 80s or something, and Tom Cruise was in it, and it was an amazing movie. So I knew of autism, but after I had met Richard and brought him home after a couple of years, Mum said to me, I think he's actually got high functioning autism. And I honestly, I was like, you just don't know him. He comes across as being rude, or he comes across as, but he's just not like us. He's just, I'd never heard the term high functioning autism. And now we're going back 20 years. My mum is a psychologist, but I don't know how she doesn't work in that area. My mother works in drug and alcohol rehabilitation. So I really don't know how she got onto that. But anyway, after Beau was born, which was many years later, she was the one that was saying, I think there's something, going on there. I think Beau's got autism. Now, I was offended. I was angry. I was upset. How dare you? How dare you say there's anything wrong with my perfect little baby? How dare anybody even imply there's anything wrong with it? But she kept pushing, and then Richard absolutely lost his mind, and it got to the point where every time she came over, he nearly wanted to pick her up and throw her out of the house. And I got stuck in the middle of my mum constantly saying, there's something wrong, there's something wrong. Keep in mind, I had Beau at a doctor by 16 months. So from 12 months, my mum was like, there's something not right here, there's something not right here. And Richard was just like, if she comes in this house and says one thing, I'm going to throw her out. That's it, gloves are off. And I was so stuck between the two. I didn't know what to do. But the more my mum kind of pushed, the more I kind of saw what she was talking about, the more I saw my own denial, and, made the appointment straight away and had to just work on the relationship between me, Richard, and my mother. But thank God that I just went ahead and made that appointment, because again, it took until he was 2 to get the actual diagnosis. And there are so many, it's such a much bigger waiting list now than it was, 15 years ago. So look, my suggestion, if 2 parents or if 2 people are disagreeing on how to manage some traits or symptoms or little things that they're seeing, and you've got this sort of little gut feeling, go to the GP, get the referral and book the appointment, because it's going to be a year anyway. And you can always cancel. But if you wait and your fight takes, let's say, a year, and then you go to the GP, and then it's another year before you can even get in, you've wasted 2 years of what could have been early intervention, what could have really made the difference in helping your kid and what they need. So I've had people contacting me where there's nothing they can do because it got to the point where they argued so much about it. One's now got an intervention order out against the other one. Child is now included, so that child is not going to be diagnosed. That's it. It's that's the end of it for that child, unless that other parent excuse me, in this particular case the mother comes around and decides, yep, you know, I need to get this kid diagnosed. Or worse, what will happen, and when I say worse, what will happen is at a later age, the child will grow up and get the diagnosis for themselves, which we are seeing a lot of adult diagnoses now. Now, I can understand how all of these adult diagnoses are coming about, because 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, so if you're in your 40s, you know, autism, unless you were rocking and flapping and nonverbal in a corner, autism just wasn't a thing. If you watch the video that I made called Asperger's versus Autism in the interviews section of the playlist, it explains exactly how Asperger's, the term came about, which was a way of describing high functioning autism. Yes, it has since been removed from the DSM. However, what it actually did, sorry, video cut off. But what it did was it actually brought the idea of high functioning autism out into the world. And that's really when we started getting a huge number of diagnosis, a huge number of adult diagnosis, because people stopped looking at autism as this, you know, severe disability, and as something that was actually far more varied, whether you want to call it higher functioning, lower functioning, whether you want to call it a spectrum, whether you want to call it whatever word that they're trying to use. The fact is that, you know, it's not, you know, it stopped people from thinking of it just as that Rain Man, really severe, rocking, flapping, non-verbal, institutionalized many years ago. So try to, so if you can watch that, that will give you a really good idea as to, you know, how the autism versus Asperger's came about and why we're getting a lot of these adult diagnoses. It's not that we necessarily have more cases. It's just that people realized that there was actually a spectrum. The evidence scientifically was for a spectrum, and so they literally changed the diagnostic manual, and that's how it ended up being called Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD, is because of this this Asperger's paper that was written about high functioning kids. They actually made the decision within the medical world that there was more evidence for there being a spectrum of autism than there was for just this very significantly diminished capacity human being. So if, you know, if you, as I said, if you're under the age of, sorry, if you're in the age bracket somewhere around sort of, I guess, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, anything above there, we're getting a lot of adult diagnoses. Now, the concerning thing, the only thing that I'm saying about not getting your child diagnosed, and if there is one parent that just absolutely won't come around, or someone that won't come around, and if there's someone that's just, you know, absolutely against it to the point where, you know, they're about to take serious action. For example, one of the situations where this person has actually gotten an intervention order because they're so strong about not having a diagnosis for their child. Come time, this child is going to grow up. Come time, and then I'm seeing so many people at my age saying to their parents, why didn't you see this? You know, I've struggled with this for so long. Why? I've just gotten diagnosed as an adult. Why didn't you see this? Now, really easy at the age of above 40, even 30, to say, well, honey, we really didn't know much about it back then. No one sort of really knew anything about it, and so we didn't know that's what it was. But you cannot say that now. A child cannot be satisfied with, we didn't do it, we didn't look into it, we didn't try and help you because we didn't know anything about it. We do. Everybody knows about it, and it can cause some very, very serious relationship issues between parents and kids, because they're like, you know, how could you have let me struggle so much and suffer through this, knowing how hard it was for me. So there's going to be a lot of, if there's adult diagnoses out there from parents who are just, you know, putting their foot down and saying no, this is one more thing to take into consideration, is that in time they will be old enough and they will get their own diagnosis, and you know, it's going to come back on them. So yeah, look, it's not a great story. There's no happy ending with this, except if you do, go ahead, book it in, just get it booked in, start the process. Even if you're not 100% sure and you're still at that stage of, oh, nah, you know, like I said, with the waiting times these days, because of all the number of adult diagnoses and all that sort of stuff, it's huge. So you may as well book it in and cancel it if you have to. But get that appointment in as soon as possible, because the earlier, the better.